So the story of Mama is actually infamous now. You all know this, that they were recording the Shapes album in the early 80s, and somebody had brought in a copy of Grandmaster Flash's The Message, and I guess Phil had heard the laughing that happens on that song, and they were talking about it. Maybe they just thought it was an interesting production technique, and so Phil was like, hey, we should try this. Or maybe, I think the idea was that he was in the vocal booth and just did that as a joke because they had been previously listening to it, maybe to entertain the engineer at the time who had showed him the track. I don't know what the deal was there. And then they decided to keep it. And I've never been a fan when Genesis does goofy things like Illegal Alien or Jesus He Knows Me. I'm just not always a fan of like the silly stuff because I really appreciate the older stuff, although Peter was obviously silly, and there was a lot of goofy stuff from the early days that was just more, now it seems less goofy, it just seems more 70s and British. But, you know, some of the more modern, sillier or funny stuff, like Anything She Does, even from Genesis, I'm not totally crazy about. And so normally a laugh like this would be something that might bother me, but it's iconic with Mama. I think it's surpassed The Message from Grandmaster Flash, and Phil uses it more than The Message. In fact, on The Message, which by the way has 40 million streams on Spotify, and Mama has 38 million streams. So just only slightly edged it out. But anyway, the laugh is on The Message is interesting. And I know why Phil would have been drawn to it, because it's used sparingly for most of the song, but towards the end of the song, it's used rhythmically. It's that ha ha ha. It's used in as like almost like it were a snare drum or a tom or like a shaker, and he's using it with the not just the meter of the lyrics, but he's using it. But Phil does this a lot when he scats along or sings along with music, and I think it's because he's a drummer and he can't solo on any instrument. You can solo on the drums, but melodically you can't solo on any instrument. And so if a guitar player didn't have a lyric for something, they would play a riff, and that would get people excited. And a keyboard player could do the same thing, or a horn player could do the same thing. But Phil is a drummer, so melodically he can't improvise or solo in any way. And so that's why he would often do the he would do that on Hand in Hand, or he would do it on Throwing It All Away, much to the chagrin of some fans. I don't entirely mind it. And I think Mama, the laugh on Mama is an example of that, where he, because Grandmaster Flash is using it in a rhythmic way, as if somebody would solo, as he's going ha, 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 like into the beat of the song. And so I think Phil is doing that as well, almost as if this would have been like a guitar riff. But he overemphasized it. It's a super ominous and dark song. It took me many years to come around on it, because when I was a kid, it scared me. And it still scares my kids. In fact, I like to cue it up right to the laugh on a Bluetooth speaker when my kids are playing in a dark room somewhere, and I play that song, and now they're in therapy, and I think they'll get over it, I think. Anyway, this is a great song. Let's look at, I love this song. I love it. I love it live. I mean, it borderlines goofy a little bit. There's a long version from the album, I believe, which is kind of strange. It's strange because it's a single, but it's borderlining an actual long song. How did it do? Was it, so it was the first single before That's All. It came out in August, so it came out 2 months before August 22nd, 1983. It came out 2 months before the album came out, which came out in October of 1983. One of the interesting things of this song, too, and now we hear it, it just sounds normal, but the Lindrum drum machine was patched into Mike Rutherford's, excuse me, a guitar amp, and that's where you get that kind of grungy, in the room sound from the drum machine, which had it been a clean drum machine sound, which they did a lot on We Can't Dance, and Phil always does. I don't know if it would have had the same effect, but because it sounds like it's in a basement, echoing off concrete, that kind of thing, gives it that ominous feel. So it went to number 4 in the UK singles chart. How else did it, how did it do in the US? US, 73. U.S. mainstream rock went to number 5, but on the Billboard Hot 100, it only went to 73. That's it. I mean, I guess that they weren't yet doing big singles, right? The next album was Invisible Touch. And that's where they started getting number ones. So they weren't, Genesis as a band weren't quite yet having massive singles. And so Mama was, bringing them up there. They certainly did well in other countries. But in US on Billboard, on the hot singles chart, it only went to 73, which is great. I've never been to 73. 74 is the highest I've ever got. Just kidding. What do you think of Mama? I mean, come on. What a great tune. What an iconic Phil Collins song, even though it's a Genesis song.